Oshkosh Board of Education is currently in a break.
Good evening, and welcome to this Wednesday, February 11th, 2015 meeting at 6 p.m. of the Oshkosh Area School District Board of Education. Has this meeting been properly noticed?
Yes, it has.
Please call the roll.
Tito.
Here.
Eliason.
Here.
Garner. Here. Herzog. Here. Lemberger.
Here.
Saginaw. Here. Wiedenhoft.
Here.
We have a quorum.
This evening, we will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by two students from South Park Elementary, Jack Stray and Joseph Henry Laus. Please stand and join them in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to thank you both for coming this evening and leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Jack and Joseph, you are free to stay and watch the rest of the meeting, but we understand that these meetings can be long and somewhat boring, so you're also free to go if you wish to do so. Thank you very much again for leading us.
Yes, you did.
All right. Next up, we're going to hear from Catherine, or is David starting?
Yep.
So David Mathers will start us off.
Thank you.
Board Administrative Report.
Thank you. Oshkosh West Board of Education report. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about what happened over the December that I couldn't cover. We had the Cinderella musical, and that was our musical for Oshkosh West High School. It was a huge audience turnout. Excellent performance from the cast that we had. We had the details set from the stage that was really interactive this year, as well as outstanding music from the pit orchestra. Because we had such a high turnout, that obviously yielded a good community and school support. Also, big thanks to Mr. Berenson for the production success. He was a contributing mentor and really coordinated everything for its success. And Mr. Singer's, thanks to him for the direction of the orchestra, and the custodians and auditorium crew for maintaining the stage. Congratulations to everyone. It was awesome. So, last week, Snow Blast. This is our break in the third quarter stretch. This is what we do to lighten things up a lot. It's our wonderful interactive week. A big thanks to Oshkosh West intramurals and the students' participation for this. It was awesome. I've never seen such a great year. This year was awesome. We had open campus lunch for everyone, and the dress-up days a lot of people participated in. We had Monday long underwear, shorts, and boots. Tuesday, blue jeans, red sweatshirt or shirt. Wednesday, tennis shoes and sweatsuit. Thursday, t-shirt, tie, and blue jeans. And Friday, your team/company/logo/trademark. So, the week schedule. Start off with day one. These happened during the hour lunch, of course. We had team distance measurement, which you can see the photos above and below. Team waistline measurement, free throws. And day two, the log saw, log toss, snow frisbee, frisbee golf, and snow bowling. Day three, it's the middle of the week. We got tug of war going on, pyramid build, and day four, board race, baseball bat race. And day five is the biggest event of all, which is the distance slide at Garbage Hill. We get an insane amount of participations. Jimmy John's was there handing out subs. We got huge spectators. It's always a great time. We had a plethora of boards this year. We never know really what to expect. We did have some snow this year, which is great for sledding and all, but yeah, we had different creative designs, which was awesome to see. So that's the face of Snow Blast this year. That's kind of provides expression towards what we all felt.
And you've run out of snow on this scene.
Right. Homecoming 2. So shortly after Snow Blast, we had Homecoming 2. Again, thank you, intramurals. This is our West Winter Formal. And we sold nearly 600 tickets. So again, that's a great turnout. And that's kind of the theme of this presentation, really, is that West was interacted in a lot of stuff. And the dance was decked out in neon for the night, and the dance kept bumping till 11:30. Okay, so blood drive. Student government is hosting the blood drive this Friday. It's in a new location. It's going to be by the auditorium, and the numbers keep growing for the blood drive. Along with this theme of participation, we had a meeting this Tuesday to release a promotion or marketing campaign for this blood drive. We want to see how we can get a lot more people going, because initially Thursday we had 55 people, which isn't that much, and we knew something needed to be done. So we quickly said, all right, so during study halls and then during lunches, we need to get a squad of people together, organized to get people to sign up, because there's not enough time, but there's a lot of people that want to get blood. So we executed this, and so far it's just been exponential growth. We have the sign-up sheet almost full, so a lot of lives hopefully will be saved with this, because the whole sheet is almost full. So that's been going really successful, and of course, to fill that supply, we have more food for students, which is a large attraction for that. Class scheduling. All freshmen, sophomores, and juniors have registered for next year. Incoming freshmen have registered for next year. And using Infinite Campus as the platform for the course, it went very well. No problems. ACT testing in March. So we got that ACT testing going on, March 3rd and 4th. All juniors will be taking this test. And we got staff members helping out, and the seniors, we will be able to relax. So it's great. So student government will be providing food and drink in the 15-minute break for all students. So yes, I will be in school, but I'll be helping out with this. So we're just trying to try and give them a snack and drink to quick have a refresher, and then they can get back to their testing. So that's kind of what the government's involved with doing. Now, we've got the Spanish trip and Diego Rivera game night to talk about. There's a new trip available for students studying Spanish, the Panama and Quito immersion. That's trip planned in June 2016. Now, Diego Rivera Honor Society, on a different tangent, that we had a game night only in Spanish. So I was a part of that, and we played different board games and just talked in Spanish. It was pretty cool. Fun event, and we get to use the cultural knowledge we know. Now, in student government legislation, we've got the courtyard and voting bills that we passed. So we did it. 2 major pieces of legislation got passed. One, the courtyards. The goal 2 years ago that I introduced, especially when I was on the board that I first opened up to, was to improve all the courtyards, because we want to get student interaction with this. The final 2 courtyards are now approved for renovation, and $4,000 were spent. So that's going to greatly improve West. So the future goal now is to incorporate this into students' lives, and we want to make it, again, interactive. Now, voting legislation, we had, quote, Jacob's idea, which was a senior approval committee, and that was established for elections. It's just to ensure that we have evaluations of the candidates before the campaign starts. And as always, have a great Wildcat Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so here's the North update for February. So first, we have some pictures from Shrek the Musical, which happened last weekend, and most of last week, actually. We were really excited about this because it was a musical geared for families and smaller children, which we haven't had much of in the past. And the student performances for the elementary and middle school, they were in stitches the whole time. It was really, really nice to have their energy when we were trying to perform. We had wonderful props. You can see the dragon up at the top. A girl and her mom built that so that that could be part of the show. And then you have Pinocchio, whose nose actually moved when the sound came up, which was kind of spectacular. And everyone really enjoyed it. We sold out 3 of the 4 shows.
And this was down at the Grand.
Yeah, the Grand Opera House. And so if you had a chance to see it, we hope you enjoyed it. The next thing we have are the Sasquatch Days. It's a week to get everyone out of the winter blues and out of the days that comes with the long third quarter stretch. So that's going to be next week. And we have dress-up days and several activities going on after school. On Saturday, the end of the week, Gatsby's Winter Formal. The theme is The Great Gatsby. So that should be exciting. Lots of Art Deco and gold and silver. And it goes from 8 to 11. We have, after school, several activities. like Mr. Oshkosh North pageant and the, of course, Stafford versus students basketball game. All right, so we have quite a bit of sports. So for boys swimming, it's moving along with sectionals this Friday in Neenah. Ryan Revelinsky, who you can see on the starting block, and Sumner Latta are potential qualifiers for state. The North Lourdes team finished 5th at the FVA conference meet last weekend, and Ryan broke the FVA 200 IM record with a time of 1 minute and 57.84 seconds to take first place, which is pretty impressive. The boys wrestling starts its tournament series this Saturday with regionals at Beaver Dam, and the top 4 regional finishers in each weight class advance to sectionals. Brandon Green took home the title with 113 pounds for North, and we will be hosting the team sectional dual meet on Tuesday, the 17th of February at 7 p.m. And whoever wins will advance to the state duels in March. Okay, more sports. The girls basketball hosts Hortonville on the 10th, and they play Oshkosh West on Friday. And the girls are currently 6-9, and they're tied for 6th place. There's only one regular season game against Kaukauna left on the 19th. And now boys basketball also have the Northwest game on Friday, and they have a record of 9-5 and are in solid 4th place for the FBA. And the North dance team also finished their season on the 31st at DC Everest, but they will be performing at basketball games, and the next one is this Friday's North versus West game. All right, so we have here just some upcoming events. The Winter Band Concert is on the 19th at 8 p.m. in the Jesse Hooper Auditorium, but that's the freshman and sophomore bands. The Wind Ensemble has a concert of their own later on in the year. On the 21st, North hosts the Middle School Vocal Solo and Ensemble Festival from 8 to 2. And the 25th, gifted students in math will be taking the American Mathematics Competition test during first and second hours. And the 26th and the 27th of February, Skills USA Regionals will be held at UW Stout. And as always, it's a great day to be a Spartan.
Thank you very much. Superintendent Mack.
Yes, it's been an interesting 2 weeks since our last gathering, but the good news for this week continues. The Multicultural Night at Merrill Elementary. Merrill Elementary families gathered to celebrate the diversity within the school community on January 15th. The evening included, among dancers, Oshkosh West High School Zumba dancing, compliments of Lynn Anderson Thurman, owner of Bodyworks International in Oshkosh, and crafts, writing about family traditions and eating delicious food. Local businesses, including Oshkosh Lanes, Oshkosh Gymnastics Center, and Hughes Chocolates, generously donated prizes. The event is part of the ongoing Family Academic Literacy Project, funded through a grant from the National Writing Project and the Kellogg Foundation. The tribe has spoken to review expectations of the Panther Way. PBIS students at South Park Middle School participated in first ever Survivor, the South Park competition during this month of January. Morning meeting alliances within each grade level tribe participated in weekly challenges focusing on different aspects of Panther life. One alliance earned individual immunity and a reward for a grade level tribe each week, while the bottom alliance was sent to Redemption Island to continue competition for a spot in the finals. On Friday, January 30th, the entire student body cheered as the top 3 immunity alliances and the bottom 3 Redemption Island alliances compete for the sole survivor. The final challenges focused on teamwork, good sportsmanship, and demonstrating the Panther Way. Winning alliances were awarded a Survivor Tiki mask and ice cream. Everyone else agreed this was a great way to review the Panther Way and expectations and to build spirit. I think one has to pay attention to a television show in order to fully understand all of those pieces. The first annual 8th grade pep band night at West on January 30th, the Oshkosh West High School Band Department held their first annual 8th grade pep band night. The 8th grade band members from Carl Traeger Middle School and Prairie Tippler Middle School and South Park Middle School were invited to participate in the pep band for a Wildcat basketball game. The night started out with a mass rehearsal followed by a pizza supper sponsored by the band parents and ended with a great pre-game performance. The evening was a great event opportunity for 8th grade students to meet high school students and to work with band directors and play great music. Oshkosh West student is selected for the U.S. Presidential Scholar. Oshkosh West High School senior Justin Shea was selected as a candidate for the United States Presidential Scholars Program. The program was established in 1964 to recognize some of our nation's most distinguished graduating seniors for their accomplishments in many areas, including academic success, leadership, and service to school and community. Over 3,900 candidates were identified each year for the academic component of the program based on having scored exceptionally well on SAT or ACT, and Justin and Oshkosh West will submit their application to the White House Commission on Presidential Scholars. If Justin is selected as one of the approximately 560 finalists, his application will move on to the next committee for review that selects 120 academic scholarships. We wish Justin the best of luck. I think it takes more than luck in this case to make that achievement. Traeger Tales. Students in grades K through 5 at Carl Traeger Elementary School were introduced to the art of Edsel Laboyles. Edsel has been a local artist in Oshkosh for many years and has the following of many fans in our community. He visited Carl Traeger to show students the many ways artists express themselves through self-portraits. The residency builds on 2 school-wide initiatives taking place at Carl Traeger. The students will be able to be drawing themselves and putting their art into in a kindness journal. The journal will document acts of kindness which students are doing in school and at home through words and pictures. They finish their journals and will be displayed on February 26th on an interactive wall displayed during Traeger's Noodles for Knowledge Family Night. Special thanks to Project SOAR and Carl Traeger PSC for funding residency. I was in an art class at Traeger last week, and it was fascinating as students were looking in little mirrors to get a picture of themselves as they were trying to draw their own facial features. So what an interesting project. Congratulations and way to go to Oshkosh West senior Chio Knudsen, who signed a national letter of intent to play soccer next year at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Natural support training. Oshkosh West High School had 21 students attend the natural supports training sponsored by CESA 6. At the training, students participated in activities that they found on a team building, communication, and supporting others. The idea of natural support training is that students can make small changes in their daily lives in order to be inclusive of all students. Students were challenged with the task of bringing this information back to West and finding ways to change the school's atmosphere. The Super Bowl party at South Park on Thursday, January 26th. Ms. Janice and Ms. Pat, food service workers at South Park Middle School, hosted a Super Bowl party for students. Students were encouraged to wear their NFL gear to school and participate in raffles during the lunch hour. There was a game day music, beanbag toss, putting in hundreds of awesome prizes that were donated to St. Vincent's Hardee's, donated by St. Vincent's Hardee's, Burger King, McDonald's, Top Brands, Pat Gola here, and Janice Polbun. So celebrating that event. This is a recent photograph just from last night, actually. Oshkosh North did a Miracle Minute donation drive during the halftime for the North Hortonville girls basketball team for the North's post-prom party. One of the fabulous young men dressed up as a young lady posed next to me. I did ask him why he didn't shave, though, for the event. It would have helped, but he was delightful. He wore flip-flops as opposed to high heels, which was really a definite plus. Jacob Shapiro has a visitor to teach tech about microgreens to help understand ecosystem science practices and the engineering design success. The Jacob Shapiro fourth grade students invited Brian Erst and from MRC Organics to visit. Brian talked about the experiments he did to figure out how to best grow seedlings on different types of non-soil media. After changing many variables and keeping track of all of his tests, he was able to start a business growing and selling microgreens to local restaurants and grocery stores. Thank you, Brian, for sharing. On the weather outside, you may be hearing "Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow" from many of our Shapiro students. Thank you to Allison Garner and Steve Eliason for leading the Ski Snow Club at Jacob Shapiro Brain-Based Instructional Laboratory School. The kickoff assembly was the success of all of our students enjoying the great outdoors in a new way. And Jefferson Elementary, new things happening at Jefferson this year. The Dreambox Academy. Students arrive at Jefferson before school and work to structured environment to increase math skills. They have reflective recess, is an opportunity for students who may need additional support with learning expected behaviors. This time is used by students to reflect on their behaviors and the harm they may have caused to others, as well as a plan for more appropriate choices. Strategies and coping skills are reinforced by the professional staff. And there's the AdvoCap volunteers. Through a federally funded program, AdvoCap volunteers help support students by reinforcing maths and literacy skills. And again, the be responsible, be respectful, be responsible, be safe, the theme of the PBS program at Jefferson. Friday Night Frenzy. On Friday, February 6th, South Park PTN and Parent Community Action Team hosted a Friday Night Frenzy, which invited families for an open gym, board games, a dance, food, and basket raffles. Items in the baskets were donated by families and local businesses. It was a fabulous turnout, and everyone had a great time hanging out with their friends and families. And then an upcoming event, Building Community Through Education, the second annual trivia contest. We're moving north. Last year it was at West. This year it's at North High School. The trivia contest is open to all students and adults from all communities. Advanced registration are highly encouraged, but teams can register at the door. For the night of the event, prizes will be awarded for first, second, and last place, as well as the best dressed team. Oshkosh North hosting this at the Field House on 2 o'clock on March 28th. Starting time at 3 o'clock. Refreshments will be available for purchase, and there will be at least 15 gift baskets valued at $100 or more raffled off, and a 50-50 raffle and other prizes that come pair. $80 a team to sign up for 8 individuals. Please review the attachments for all of those potential events. We would look forward to seeing it grow. Last year it was a tremendous success at West, and the efforts of some of the brainiest people in the Oshkosh community are putting together the trivia questions for this coming year. So we look forward to discovering last year one of those being able to solve what a 5th grade math problem, of which there were individuals who weren't as successful as they thought they should be on 5th grade math problems. But with that, and lastly, the activities that I've been involved with for the last two-week period that involve both school and community. With that, completes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Mack. Next, are there reports from other board members? John?
Yep. The Education Committee met on January 29th here in the district office. The people attending were Steve Eliason, Allison Garner, Kim Brown, Tim Dolish, Julie Mosier, and me. We started with a public forum. There was no one there, so we went on to other things. First was a little homework assignment that the district administrators had given us. Yes, homework, we get it too. Trying to define the difference between equal and equitable. And it was interesting picking those two terms apart and coming up with a a good definition. We decided we liked equitable better than equal for our district. And
my go-to hairstyles, because I am all about the lazy hair routine. No,
I got to think about where I was now. Oh, okay.
You were thinking about your hair,
Equity, there you go. And that was leading it to sort of how we want to envision the future of the district. And we kind of came up with, we're looking for some common things from building to building, that all buildings should be clean and safe, and everyone should get the good basics in terms of like literacy and math and things like that. But then we also want to have room for some diversity, because we serve a very diverse student population, and we like everyone to be able to sort of blossom in different directions. And so that's going to sort of connect to strategic plan goal area number 4 as we move forward. And we also want to kind of get that information out to the community, kind of, as we were talking about in the earlier meeting, sell our district, because we do great things here, and sometimes that it doesn't always get out there. Then we moved on to a discussion about GPA and graduation requirements, and I believe in the end, after looking at it from different ways, we kind of decided to keep our GPA graduation requirement right where it is. There was reasons for setting that, and they seem to be good ones. Our next meeting hasn't been set yet, I don't think, because there's some conflicts with the February 19th date, so I can't report on when that's going to be, but it'll be posted. So that's the report from the Education Committee, with a little dance music thrown in. So.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Are there other reports? No, seeing none, we will move on to our first workshop for this evening, Fund 46, Sue Schnorr. Welcome back, Sue.
If I can open this to get to the agenda.
And Jim Fox, I guess, as well. Welcome, Jim.
We're here to talk about Fund 46. It's a newly created capital improvement trust fund. So we're going to talk about some of the limitations, the benefits, what the DPI requirements are, and what the board's next steps would be if you choose to go forward with this. Essentially, Fund 46 was created last year in 2013 by Wisconsin Statute 120. It's not a legally established irrevocable trust fund like funds. You have Fund 73 right now, which is a trust fund that you have set money aside to pay for post-employment benefits. That is a legally created irrevocable trust. Any money that you move to that trust fund cannot be used for anything but post-employment benefits. This has been statutorily set up that you can only use it for capital improvements, but it's not as stringent as the irrevocable trust fund like you have in Fund 73.
You could dissolve the trust at a later date and move the funds.
But it's still once you have the money there and you spend the money, it should be spent for things that are in your capital improvement plan. 7 districts have already set up a Fund 46, but then again, it was just created last year. 440, our budget is segregated into separate funds. Fund 10 is our general operating fund. Fund 40 is typically where we put borrowed money and then we spend that borrowed money on certain projects. What I'm going to talk about tonight is Fund 41, which is a capital expansion fund, which is kind of similar to Fund 46. We also use Fund 47 is the money that we have from our energy exemption money, and Fund 49 is money from Oaklawn that we use to build Oaklawn. But I will talk a little bit about the difference between 41 and 46. 41 is called a capital expansion fund. You actually have to levy to Fund 41. So when you set your levy in the fall, one of them, instead of Fund 10, Fund 38, Fund 39, Fund 80, you actually list Fund 41, and you have to levy for it when you levy at the time you set your tax levy. But it has to be within your revenue limit. And because this district never has any additional taxing authority than what you need to operate, you really haven't had the authority to start a Fund 41. 46 is different because You don't have to set any money at a specific time when you set your tax levy. You can transfer money anytime throughout the year. So let's say you get to June and you realize you're going to have a surplus. Instead of letting that surplus just sit back into Fund 10, you can move that surplus over to Fund 46. And the benefit of it is it's aided in the year that you make the transfer. So let's say you have, in those couple of years before I came here where you had like $2 million and $3 million surpluses, because you didn't spend that money, you didn't get aided on it the next year. If this Fund 46 would have been available, you could have moved all or a portion of that money over to Fund 46 and still got the state aid on that money the next year. Some of the benefits are, as I just said, it allows you to fully expend the general fund. So if you think you're going to have a surplus at the end of the year, you can transfer that money over to Fund 46, and it kind of keeps your state aid then kind of consistent. It allows you to identify planned expenditures for capital improvement. And I think that the key one is number 5, where it provides an alternative to protect threatened fund balances. As you know, the state legislature is looking at district fund balances, and I think part of it is educating them as to why we need to have fund balances. We use our fund balance for cash flow purposes, and I don't think they quite understand that. But if they are truly going to look at fund balances and look negatively on fund balances, it's a way to start moving some of that fund balance to another place. Some of the limitations, there are just a few. You can't use the funds until 5 years after you've established the fund. So let's say you think this is a great idea and you establish the fund this year. You can't even touch that money until 5 years from the year that you establish the fund. It actually has to be segregated into a separate fund and can't be used for cash flow purposes. The main reason we have fund balance is to ease our cash flow. So this truly has to be allocated into a separate fund and cannot be transferred, cannot be borrowed, cannot be used for cash flow purposes. The benefit of our current economy is interest rates are so low. I mean, we short-term borrow, I don't have the exact number, but I think it's about $7.5 million this district short-term borrows. But our interest rate on that borrowing is less than 1%. So if we do have to short-term borrow a couple $1 million more because you have money in Fund 46, you're not spending a ton of money to short-term borrow. On the flip side of that, interest rates on investments are so incredibly low that it's not like we're, getting a ton of money on our investments either. So having that money in a segregated fund really isn't to the district's disadvantage at this time. If borrowing rates start to creep up, then that's a whole another story. You have to have a 10-year capital improvement plan, and Jim's going to talk about that in a little bit. I am sure it allows you to amend that capital improvement plan over time, because if you develop a 10-year plan, there's no way you can stick to that plan religiously. I'm sure it allows for some adjustments to that plan. The funds can only be used for things that are in that plan. I think those are most of the limitations. Funds can only be invested per statute 6606. We're really limited as a school district in what we can invest money in, which is probably a good thing. You can't take a lot of risks on that money. So this money, because it's not a true irrevocable trust fund, can only be invested in the things that we as a school district can invest in. But like our Fund 73 that we hold with a third party can be invested in a little bit higher risk things with greater interest rates. This is limited by what we as a district can invest in. The requirements is you have to have a long-term capital improvement plan, and the board has to approve that plan before you can actually do the resolution to create a Fund 46. The DPI is going to want to see that you approve the plan. They're going to want to see that you created a resolution to create the fund, the trust fund, and then they're going to want proof that we actually have it in a segregated fund. So I'm sure as part of our audit every year, they're going to want to look to see the bank statements from that fund to make sure we haven't flipped the money in and out to borrow it for other things. And then Jen is currently working on a long-term capital improvement plan. Both him and I have experience doing a 5-year plan, which is pretty standard. 10 years is a long time out. So I was going to have him talk a little bit about how he is working on that.
Thank you. 10 years is a long time. But our discussions based on Fund 46 and the benefits of a 10-year plan are significant, not only for Fund 46, but from a facilities perspective to really help us project and understand where our finances are going to be most or best used. To help develop this plan, I just want to give you a little bit of a background. Because it's so far out and because my relative newness to this district, we really relied on building administrators, their input, athletic directors, rec department, custodial, maintenance staff. My direct observations through walking through the school districts, talking with members of the district. We utilize contractors. We have a lot of trades that are in and out of our buildings. They are professionals. We get feedback on projects, perhaps McKinstry, other trades that have been within our building and have identified things, site observations. We also get information through audits. We do contract with third parties that audit our roofs, audit our hardscape, which are parking lots and concrete. So all that information is really coming into our office and is falling into a spreadsheet for each individual building. We then determined, well, how are we really going to address or prioritize which tasks throughout this 10-year plan we choose to address earlier or later within that 10-year period. What seems to be typical when you're looking at longer-term plans is I had decided to really assign a weight or a priority to each one of these tasks. This is something that can be tweaked. We can certainly, through conversation, evaluate this, but right now, number one would indicate a project or a request is something that poses a health, safety, code-related issues, potential safety, security hazards, ADA violations. I mean, this is something that really, as a district, ought to deserve our attention. Number two would be items that have adverse consequences if they're deferred. Imminent failure could cause damage to facility contents, impact daily operations such as a roof or structure where if it would fail, it could cause other financial burdens on the district. And number three would be tasks or projects that will reduce future capital and operating costs, something that could alleviate some constraints within our own budget by spending today's dollars, saving tomorrow. And four would be tasks or projects that are perceived to add value to the district, aesthetic enhancements, space functionality, again, somewhat subjective, but something that wouldn't fall within the upper three categories. And again, these are meant to help us try to determine whether or not they get these things are plotted in the first 1, 2, 3, 5 years or beyond. Certainly, much of the requests that we have as we start to total year to year, there really isn't a way that we're going to be able to fund these, regardless of what types of plans we enact. But I think it's a good communication tool for the board, internally for our own district, certainly within the facilities department. And as we start to defer some of these items, I think they're great discussion points. School districts, as they accrue funds and as they want to invest within their own facilities, they certainly have the benefit of doing so if they determine something is of a higher priority and more important to them. I think that helps them to maintain that ownership of their facility. But again, this is I guess our first crack at this 10-year budget, and this is how we see the breakdown occurring at this point.
Jim's budget's really been hurt this last year because he had that 5-year, $1.3 million revenue limit exemption every year, and so once the $1.3 million was taken away, $1.3 million was just taken out of his budget as well. So when he just looks at things like roofs and parking lots, there's enough there to eat up his capital improvement budget every year. So hopefully over time, I mean, this isn't a short-term solution by any means, it's a long-term solution. It'll at least maybe be able to augment his budget a little bit.
I'm assuming that these things are being recorded in a fairly general term, so that if you get to some point, you're not, I mean, obviously you have to do something in order to determine the amount that you believe it's going to be. If it's a roof, you think it's going to be X amount, and it's going to be based on a certain kind of roofing material. But generally, we're speaking about, I guess, X amount of square feet of roofing, in a certain amount of time, not necessarily at you're not pinpointing necessarily different roof areas or different walls or different boilers or anything like that, so that when we do withdraw from this fund for these things, if we know that there's a certain amount of roofing we have to do, but things flip, this roof lasted longer than we thought, this one didn't, or the boilers or what have you, that we've got some play, some ability to adjust from year to year which items we actually would perform first.
The statute gives very little guidance on what the 10-year plan needs to look like. It doesn't say how general it has to be or how specific it has to be.
Okay.
So I think part of that is Jim's discretion as to, how much time and effort and how much detail he wants to put in
Sure.
it. But I would, because that's a 10-year plan, there's no way I wouldn't expect that it can't be changed over time. That on an annual basis or semi-annual basis, he has the opportunity to update that. and revise
We've
that.
actually been preparing, my office, we've been preparing 20-year plans, believe it or not, for the federal housing and urban development have required that of all the housing authorities in the state. So I think 10 years something, try and do it for 20. And they won't let you use a system of 1, 2, and 3. You have to pinpoint the year based on the remaining useful life of the product.
To help answer your question, initially, the plan I think will be very flexible.
Okay.
In the background of that plan, we do have a lot of specificity with regard to specific areas of a roof, for example, or a specific parking lot that is due now. If we do get to that year and we find that we have greater needs.
Right, a greater need
Or
somewhere else.
that this particular thing can be moved 1 or 2 years through some general maintenance, we should have that flexibility to do
Okay.
that.
Great.
And I would caution on the issue of what Jim is really working on is a 10-year plan that, for our funding source, is only implemented 5 years from now, if and when dollars is set aside. So we're really talking about 15 years out and the end of the 10-year plan, because with the 5-year hold window before you could expend any funds put into that fund, we're really dealing with a 15-year window in the long run, with the unfortunate piece of the fact that we still have to plan for those things that come due in year 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 without that benefit of any set-aside dollars other than an annual allocation.
Board action that's needed, I mean, if you truly are in favor of a Fund 46, you have to approve the long-term capital improvement plan, and kind of the timeline we're looking at is, I thought I should probably go to facility and finance first, so looking at possibly in May, having at least a rough draft of it done to take to facility and finance, with then a possible approval by the full board in June, and then a resolution by the full board creating the long-term capital improvement fund in June as well. And then that still gives you till the end of June to transfer any money over that you want to in the first year.
You don't think it'll be ready by May, just because of the amount of work that needs to be done between now and then to get the fund to actually produce the...
I guess I told Jim that he has till May. If it's done any sooner, I mean, we can always take it to facility and finance sooner than that.
Okay, thanks.
The next steps are obviously to complete that 10-year plan. The board then has to approve that 10-year plan. You have to pass a resolution creating the fund. You have to create a separate bank account for that fund, and then determine the amount of the initial funding prior to June 30th if you actually want to start funding it this year. There's no requirement that you have to fund it the first year you create it, but it might not be a bad idea to at least throw some money in there.
David?
Okay, so if you're talking with 5 years, that being said, with an additional 10 years, I'm looking at the interest rates especially because they're so low. 15 years is a long period of time, so I'm wondering are you locked in at that price when you get into this fund? Are you locked in that interest rate?
No, not at all. Because districts are really limited in what we can invest in, we can invest in CDs, but because the rates are so low, I wouldn't go very long-term out with CDs because you never know what's going to happen.
And there would be no risk, like looking through like a 10-year scale of them jumping 1 year, and there wouldn't be much risk involved with that if interest rates were to go up?
Right, we could reinvest what the money is invested
Sure.
in.
Okay.
She has to put the money into a fund, but what that fund invests in could be changed year to year
Okay.
Yes.
within the limitations
Right.
of the district.
And the risk factor is clearly one. When the housing crisis started a number of years ago, there were a number of school districts across the country that had invested in funds that were higher risk that proved to be highly risk because of the devalued and the failure of home mortgages. And there's some very strict guidelines that school districts have to avoid those kind of investments.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Sue, one of the conversations I had with Mark was you don't necessarily have to wait you have to wait 5 years, but the money doesn't have to sit for 5 years before it can be utilized. Is that accurate? So if it were opened with X amount of dollars today, even though it were funded along the way, I believe those funds added in year 3 could still be used in year 5. Is that correct?
Yes, it's not like what you invest in year 1, you can use year 5, what you invest in year 2, you use year 6. You can be investing for 5 years, and at the end of year 5, you do a project that uses all the money.
After the first 5 years, you can do
The funds don't have to sit for 5 years.
Right,
Once
the
5 years
initial of the investment has to sit for 5 years. You can't start drawing out until you've reached the fund's been 5 years old. But
Purpose is to
at
make it
year
hurt.
5,
To make it hurt a little bit so that you don't just start dumping.
but at year 6, you can draw out the whole thing and do a project if you so choose.
Right.
Other questions? Barb?
This makes a lot of sense to me, unless I'm missing something, and I don't think I am. I think you did a great job of explaining this, and we heard an update at the last Facilities and Finance Committee meeting on this as well. Historically speaking, the district has often looked at maintenance or capital improvement funds to balance the budget, and so that has resulted in deferred maintenance. And the district, again, historically speaking, has made commitments to maintaining older buildings. And that comes with a cost. It comes with a great opportunity cost, because those buildings that are literally 100, 105 years old, and we have a number of them, need to be updated. Those of us who own homes or maybe rent apartments know that if you don't keep up with maintenance, you'll pay the price down the line. And so I think this helps us to protect our physical assets, our buildings, in the long run. And so I think it makes a lot of sense to pursue this.
Other comments?
I would like to see this enacted sooner rather than later, just because of what is going on in Madison. When we first looked at this, one of the caveats in here truly is, like, if we put $1 million, correct me if I'm wrong, but if we put $1 million from fund balance into Fund 46, you get 52% back from the state, so you're actually getting $1.5 million, which you have to use for capital improvement in that fund instead of $1 million, which is a pretty good turnaround. That's, of course, why they have you wait 5 years, but I think that every year that I've been on the board, and certainly before I was on the board, stuff comes up, and it's a scramble to try to figure out how to fix this roof or this boiler or this kind of thing. And this is something that is long overdue as far as the prudence of good stewardship on these buildings. So I think that there's two real nice caveats here, potentially three. One, we're doing a smart thing by planning ahead effectively for 15 years. Two, we're getting state aid on an expenditure that we're making on capital improvements. And three, we're positioning ourselves so that if Madison decides to start raiding municipal government's fund balances, that we can, quite frankly and slickly, move our money relatively rapidly into something in which they're going to actually have to give us state aid on. So I think we should do this quickly, as quickly as possible.
Sure.
But Jim still has till May.
Yes, I understand.
We want to have a good 10-year plan, not just a thrown-together one, but
The only question I had
Plan
on
is
this
well
really-
underway, so we're doing...
The only question I really had on this was, if we develop this plan, this 10-year improvement plan, can we fund this outside of Fund 46? I mean, like, if we have things on here in this 10-year plan, capital improvement plan, but we don't have enough money, obviously, in Fund 46 or something, we can fund this through other outside sources
Yes.
as well, right?
Well, right, this particular plan, through my annual budget, my capital improvement plan, will address some of these items. As Sue had alluded to earlier, I mean, just the parking lot and roofing requirements alone will really consume most of my annual capital improvement budget. So we're going to see, as Stan had indicated, the first 5 years really aren't funded as part of this plan. So I'm going to be deferring some of these maintenance issues, and that's just a natural byproduct of the state of the budget. So as those items get deferred, we will budget, we'll chip away. This particular plan will get updated probably several times a year. It really is a living document. It's not designed to be etched in stone. I can't say how often, but I know my 5-year plan in previous years was updated probably 4, 5, 6 times a year as things became more important within a facility, perhaps through failures, or as we find other items that are in need, we'll add them to the plan, modify the plan, and certainly as we complete capital improvement projects, and we'll remove them from the plan and update that as well.
And one of the things that I would want to just remind us of is the fact that, I think it was alluded to earlier, I think Dr. Herzog mentioned it, the average age of our buildings, we're really approaching an average age of 74 years on our buildings. But the one blessing of all of this, with the exception of, and because of the energy retrofit, both the previous one and the one we're going into now with McKinstry, the items in Category 1 and some of Category 2 will be covered in the McKinstry for all buildings with the exception of Traeger and Middle, and also Jefferson and Oak Lawn, because all of those were buildings that have not been and would not be impacted by the retrofit, but all other buildings that are older than that are benefiting from the items that are in Category 1 and 2 of Jim's criteria. And so it puts us in a relative, if this is to come into effect and is a good thing, we are in the best possible position to move forward because of the benefit of the wisdom of this board of doing the 2012 and now the 2014 energy retrofits, because we have a really running start on protecting ourselves for those oldest buildings, with the exception of those 3 to 4 newest generation buildings that have been built in the district. So I feel really good about this direction to go, and it gives us a breathing window on some of the other things that would haunt us had we not tackle these issues. And remember, this board has invested well over $55 million worth of a deferred maintenance investment, that includes building one new school, to make a difference, so that 4 years ago, 75 million, which has certainly grown to a bigger number, we're making progress towards that long-term issue. And so this is a good thing on top of the action that the board has taken on these retrofit approval of programs as well. So,
other comments? Questions?
We'll be back.
We will look for this to come back to us
May
or sooner.
Jeez, poor guy.
All right, Pupil Services Strategic Plan.
This is Matt's inaugural formal board presentation, and as I met with him on another issue earlier today, I noticed he was very well dressed for a board presentation this evening. So that's not normally Matt's full attire, but he knew that he and I also shared being interviewed last week about the measles outbreak, and he quickly ran home, changed clothes to make sure he had a tie on for that interview, and tonight for presentation. We are so pleased, Matt.
Now his secret is out.
Yeah, in short 2 months of being on the job, he is just doing an excellent job, and we're so pleased with his work coming into this role and kind of really changing drastically his hats. So we appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And I usually do wear a tie to work. It was just, I think that was the first day I haven't worn a tie since I started, and it just so happened to be the day that we were on the news, so I did well. So as Mr. Mack mentioned, I'm going to be presenting my pupil service strategic plan. And to start out, just to give you a basic overview, my plan is made up of 5 primary goals. Each goal has multiple objectives and action steps. The goals and objectives are not in any particular order. And there are no timelines listed. There's more of a general sense of when things are going to be taking place going forward. And this is considered a working document. So there will be modifications and additions that are added to the plan over time. So my first goal is to create a more collaborative pupil service team that operates more efficiently and effectively. And upon taking on this role, I met with all of our pupil service groups. And one of the general themes that came out of our meetings is that they do a great job of collaborating and communicating with one another at the building level, but there's a breakdown at the district level. We don't have that same type of relationship or communication that takes place. So that's where this goal really came out of. And the first objective I have is to make pupil service staff aware of one another's role in order to utilize each other more effectively. So some of the things we're going to be doing to accomplish that. I've already had each pupil service group present their current role and professional capabilities at one of our in-service sessions. And from there we created a Google document, so it'll serve as a resource. So if any pupil service staff has a question about what another's role is at any particular level, they can access that document. But we also listed individual skills or trainings that pupil service team members have been through. So for instance, if I'm a social worker at one of our middle schools and I'm interested in having parents trained in Love and Logic, I can go on that document and find out who our Love and Logic trainers are for the district among our pupil service staff members. So it's more of a quick and easy guide for our pupil service staff to access. One of the other things we're going to be doing is I'm going to have each of our groups update their job descriptions. I don't know when the last time that occurred, but with pupil services, it seems like things are constantly changing. So even if it was 5 or 6 years ago, there's a good chance there may be things on those documents that are out of date. So along with that, we have been holding regular pupil service team meetings as a large group since I started. And those have they seem to be going pretty well. That's something we're going to continue to do next year too, to tackle some more of our district goals going forward. The second objective is to examine the efficiency of our current pupil service staff based on employment numbers. So one of the things I'm going to do is survey some of our surrounding districts to see where their numbers are at. I've also started looking into some of our state and national organizations to see what their recommended numbers are. And from there, I'm going to take that information, do a review of our staffing, and really try to identify areas where we may have gaps or we don't align with trends that are seen through surrounding districts or with the recommendations from our national organizations. Our third objective is to review and refine the components of our school counseling program. Our current school counseling model was last updated in 2007. So we're going on 8 years now, so it seems like a pretty good time to take a closer look. And as I explained to our guidance staff earlier today, I haven't had the opportunity yet to read through our current model in detail. It's something I plan on doing over the next several months here, but I have had conversations with Greg Curtis, who's the DPI counseling representative, and I've also been looking through the most recent DPI comprehensive counseling manual. So I'm starting to get some ideas and thoughts about how we can improve the scope and sequence of our curriculum going forward, and that's something that I'll definitely want to include our counseling staff in as well, those conversations and how we move forward with that, but also reviewing how we could potentially modify some of the other parts of the counseling model, including student planning, responsive services, and systems of support. Our fourth and final objective for Goal 1 is to work with pupil service staff to use data more effectively within their roles. So the first thing that we've done is we're having all of our PBIS internal and external coaches trained on the behavioral component of Infinite Campus. And our external coaches were trained back in January, and this week our internal coaches are going to be trained. So what they'll be able to do is take that behavioral data that's in Infinite Campus and pull it out and make it more useful for our individual schools to analyze. So we can figure out behavioral trends, which should lead to more effective action plans. We've also trained our school social workers on how to use the attendance component of Infinite Campus. And one of the things I want to do moving forward is do data digs from time to time with both of those groups. Hopefully, we could do one at the end of the year to look at the data that was input this year for both behavior and attendance, and then use that to develop an action plan going into next year related to those two topics. And hopefully, once that plan is developed, we can do more periodic data digs next year to see if the plans we put in place are really having the effect that we had hoped. Goal 2 is to refine our crisis plan to improve communication among pupil service staff and to better address mental health needs of students. And this was one of the other big things that was touched on with our pupil service staff when I was doing my visits earlier in the year. One of the things that we're doing is we're figuring out ways to streamline the communication process. So when a crisis occurs, what would happen in the past is pupil service staff were emailed after the fact. If it was at night or on the weekend or over summer, where they hadn't been checking their email consistently, they wouldn't know about it, or they'd get to school on Monday and then find out. And our pupil service staff really need to be the first responders in a lot of these incidents, and we need to make sure that they're aware of what's going on when it comes to a crisis in the district. So we are working on a plan for communication, but also for coverage. So if something happens at one of the schools in our district, just streamlining the process of who's going to respond, and then also, when we are responding, what are the roles that each staff member is going to take on within that crisis situation. The second objective with that is to create a structure and a common practice to meet the mental health needs of all students in a time of crisis. So we have some tremendous pupil service staff members in our district, and when a crisis does occur, they do an amazing job. They really do. But I want to make sure that all of our pupil service staff feels comfortable going into those situations and has the training that's necessary to be as effective as possible in that role. So one opportunity we have this year is to have all of our pupil service staff trained in PREPARE, which is School Crisis Prevention and Intervention Training Curriculum. And this is a curriculum that's sponsored by the National Association of School Psychologists. There's a great deal of research and evidence behind it. And the state of Wisconsin actually has a grant this year that allows school districts to have this training for free. The only cost is the supplies that we need, which is a manual. So it's a perfect time to do it. And I think it's really going to give our staff the tools that are necessary to be the best it can be when they're responding to a crisis. We're going to use that and incorporate that to what we're doing with EPCOT and make sure that fits into our overall district crisis response model. And once that's all in place, I want to create a pupil service crisis response guide that all of our pupil service staff members will have that will lay all of this information out. And that's also something we can provide to new staff members to make that transition a little bit easier for them as well. Goal 3 is to implement policies and practices to meet the mental health needs of all students and to support AODA treatment and prevention. So first objective is to provide staff with training and professional development opportunities to help them meet the mental health needs of all students. So one thing that we've done is we've registered all interested pupil service staff in trauma-informed care and adverse childhood experiences training that's being held at CISA 6 on May 5th. And that's with Dr. Dipsa Nipsfaria. He's from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and he's one of the leading researchers on trauma-informed care. So it's a great opportunity for our pupil service staff. From there, we're also, actually this week, we have 2 of our pupil service staff members being trained on youth mental health first aid. So going into next year, they will be able to train staff members, who's ever interested, as well as parents and community members on youth mental health first aid. I also want to explore trauma-informed care training, and that's something that I haven't really found that's offered in the state at this point, but if that is something that is an option going forward, I'd like to have at least a couple of our pupil service staff members trained as trainers for trauma-informed care as well, because that is an issue that is only growing, and it's going to continue to be at the forefront of pupil services going forward.
Is that something you've experienced elsewhere, or I guess what makes you put that on the forefront of your list?
It just seems over the past few years that that's been a growing emphasis. You know, and when you think about practice for pupil services, you're constantly looking at, okay, well, if there are behavioral issues, you're looking at mental health, but a lot of times what's ignored is, what's really happened in the child's past that could be contributing to what you're seeing in the classroom. So. Second objective is to identify current supports and needs with regard to AODA treatment and prevention and implement best practice. So the first action step is to work with schools, both high schools and middle schools, parents, community organizations to complete the DPI AODA prevention program assessment tool. And this is more or less a checklist that covers a wide variety of settings. It not only looks at individual schools, it looks at what we're doing from a district level standpoint. It also asks parents information about their perspectives on AODA, and it also looks at what community supports are in place. And really, by completing the survey, we can identify where there may be needed supports in our district and our community. So we can use that to develop an action plan going forward. So once that tool is used and completed, we can use our district AODA committee to review the data, and then hopefully that will contribute to our action plan. And once our action plan is in place, part of the objective is to conduct periodic follow-up assessments to make sure that what we're doing is effective. And then eventually, we'd like to use this data to apply for the DPI biannual AODA grant that's offered. And it's from $15,000 to $25,000. So once we have our plan in place and moving, that would be something that would be great to get. The third objective is to build community partnerships that lead to more outside providers supporting students with mental health and AODA needs, both in and out of school. Earlier in January, I met with representatives from Catalpa Health to discuss options for expanding our school-based mental health and AODA treatment. Right now, they're currently working with Washington Elementary and Webster Middle School and next year North High School for a host program. But research shows that there are a few things that move the needle, like having outside providers offering treatment within school buildings. So Catalpa did a great job of laying out some options that they have going forward that range quite a bit in terms of the cost that would be. But I also want to look into other organizations that could offer mental health and AOD support within our buildings, and also funding options going forward for that. Our fourth goal is to expand and refine alternative education options for OASD students. So the first objective is to identify needs related to middle-level alternative education programming and examine best practice in developing these programs. Just talking to principals and other staff members, it sounds like additional options at the middle level are something that would be greatly beneficial for our district. So one thing I want to do is survey middle-level principals to get a better feel of what their alternative education needs are, and then develop a committee to explore alternative education models that we could put in place based on their perceived needs. We would then gather and review information from surrounding districts on what they're doing for middle-level alternative education, and then based on whatever model is chosen to meet our needs, explore funding options to meet the costs of that. Going on from there, once that model is established, identify exactly how we're going to implement our middle level alternative education plan, and then look to see if there are community partnerships in Oshkosh that could support our program. And then once that program is in place, collect data from the second semester of implementation going on to identify where we're at, if there are additional action steps that are needed, or if it's having the effect that we had hoped. The second objective is to examine alternative education options at the elementary and high school levels. One thing that we've started to do is have talks with Second Chance staff, possibly expanding Second Chance to also meet the needs of our students who are going through the expulsion or pre-expulsion process. Right now we have a lot of options for students who are in special education, but those students who are going through that process without an IEP, our options are really very limited. So this would be one way that we could meet their educational needs as they're going through that process. And we also want to review the current alternative education options that are in place at both the elementary and high school levels and see if there's anything we can do to improve those as we go forward. The fifth and final goal is to reduce the percentage of African American students receiving emotional behavioral disability services and the percentage of Hispanic students receiving speech and language services to more closely align with national norms. And this goal really comes out of our district disproportionality plan that we've created with the Department of Public Instruction. So our first objective is to use discipline data to identify schools that are most disproportionate in disciplinary practices. In the past, when we've created our plan with DPI, we've always looked at it from a district level. And just thinking about our district and the schools within our district, each school is very unique in many ways. So when we're trying to create a district level plan, it may work well for one school, but maybe not for another. So instead of continuing to focus on it from a district lens, I'd like to focus more on it from an individual school standpoint. So one of the ways we're going to do that is use our school psychologists, who are external PBIS coaches, to calculate risk ratios for each school. And what a risk ratio is it's a probability of a particular outcome for one group of individuals. So in this particular case, we'd use our discipline data to calculate risk ratios for our African American population, as well as some of our other racial or ethnic groups. And when you're thinking about risk ratios, a risk ratio of 1.0 is completely neutral. A risk ratio above 1 is elevated. A risk ratio below 1 is underrepresented. And then from a district standpoint, what we're really going to want to do is focus on risk ratios that are at 1.25 or above. Those are really the buildings that we would need to focus our attention in. What we would then do is work with them to develop an action plan that is geared more toward their individual building rather than the district itself. The second objective is to build cultural competency among all district staff members. So one of the ways we're going to do that is to provide professional development opportunities for all staff that focus on building cultural competency and reducing bias. We have one of our speakers for our PBIS Summer Institute that we're going to be putting in place is from the Wisconsin RTI Center that deals specifically with cultural competency and implicit bias. So that'll be a great option for a lot of our staff. 2 through 4 are really recommendations that we put in place from DPI when we did our disproportionality audit in January. The first is to provide professional development for all special education staff on best practice for considering and documenting cultural and social background information during the evaluation process. And this is geared specifically toward EBD evaluations. We're also going to provide professional development for all special education staff on documenting the consideration of appropriate instruction for both literacy and math during EBD evaluations. A lot of times during the evaluation process, you tend to focus on the behavior, which is the primary issue with an EBD evaluation. What we tend to pass over sometimes is whether or not a student has received appropriate instruction, and if they haven't, how that is impacting their behavior. And then the fourth action step is to utilize the culturally responsive practices in schools checklist that is on the DPI website. It's a fairly comprehensive checklist, so we may not be able to use the whole thing, But we're going to work with our school psychologist to maybe pick out parts of that checklist that would be most relevant to not only our district, but to the evaluations that we do. And finally, the third objective is to form and utilize community partnerships to assist with addressing risk factors that lead to students meeting eligibility criteria for EBD. So I'd like to look more into research on what contributes to EBD identification with risk factors, and figure out a way to identify which of those risk factors are most prevalent within our Oshkosh area school district students. And if we're able to identify which risk factors are most prevalent, we can target those risk factors not only as a district, but also utilizing those community resources to hopefully reduce our overall EBD numbers. That is it. Any questions?
I got to tell you that the goal number 5, the way it's stated, drives me crazy. And it's really a matter of wording. I think I understand perfectly what you're trying to do, but the way it's stated here, it sounds like we're going to reduce this service because we happen to be above a national norm, when in fact what you're trying to do, I assume, from what you've stated, is to determine why we're above that national norm.
Right.
And I guess I'm wondering if we could maybe change the wording of the goal to more reflect the idea that we would simply go ahead and reduce these services simply because we're above a national norm. It sounds awful and not like what you're really trying to do.
No, but we wouldn't be reducing services by any means.
It says reduce the percentage of African American students receiving emotional behavior disability services, and the percentage of Hispanic students receiving speech and language services.
Right.
But, you know, if we happen to have a population that's in need of those services, even if it's above the national norm, obviously we want to provide those services.
Right. And the goal is, the hope is over time, the policies and services that we put in place will naturally reduce to fewer students in those populations requiring the services. But I can work on changing
So
it.
I don't have a problem with what you're trying to do, but when I read this, I have a problem with what this says.
It's because we've over-identified for years, so as a way to address it, like with the Hispanic, and that's the wording that the DPI would prefer us to use, we have over-identified. We brought in a speech language pathologist that speaks Spanish now to help address that, 2 years ago when I came on. So really, we are over-identifying because we're not looking at cultural factors when we
I
do
understand.
evaluation.
We've got 3 of us here and 4 of us here who all have special ed director background license. I think the real question, and I think maybe troubling, is for those students who are truly identified correctly, is not to reduce the service.
Right.
The issue is what we're attempting to clarify, and I think maybe some wordsmithing there, is to conform to the over-identification of the reasons that some of the students who are identified really shouldn't be identified for that service because they've been misidentified. And if we can find a way to kind of deal with compliance with DPI and our objectives, but at the same time, I think respond to Matt's question of are we reducing services either in speech language for Hispanic students or services for EBD students who are properly identified? No. The goal is to make sure that those we identify are truly those that should be in those programs. And so I think we understand the message.
Being outside of your world, I understand what you're trying to do, but looking at this, it sounds
It's like we're taking them away.
It sounds like you're trying to take away services solely on the grounds that you're above a national norm, and that's not what you're trying to do. So. It's a minor point. Does anyone else have questions for them? Bob?
I first of all want to commend the work that you've put into this and involved staff to do this. I think it's always good to create baseline data in terms of where we are and what we might do to better serve students in everything that we do in the system. I do have a couple of questions, though. Under the budget financial impact, you've indicated that this fits into the budget and it's been reviewed by the district business office. and yet Goal 1, Objective 2, Goal 3, Objective 1, Goal 4, Objectives 1 and 2 would seem to me to potentially have budget impacts down the line unless whatever costs would be involved, for example, with training, or if you find through Goal 1, Objective 2 that we are, up in this, again, above the state average or above state and national norms for ratios of social workers, psychologists, and counselors being available to students, that would carry with it some budget implications down the line. So I can appreciate right now, perhaps, that there's no budget implication, but were you thinking that any training would be absorbed within existing budgets, or what were you thinking in terms of that?
The nice thing about most of the training that's built into the plan is it's relatively inexpensive, or it's covered through grants from our district or surrounding districts.
Okay.
So for instance, like the QPR training, Community for Hope is currently offering some options to have some of our staff trained, as well as Samaritan counseling. So that will be no cost to the district. Some of the other trainings, like through CISA 6, the overall cost is relatively minimal, maybe $50 a student, which fits in with the budget from a standpoint of professional development that we allocate for staff members. So, in terms of possible additions with staff and different things like that, because it's unknown right now, it could be an expense, but it may not be as well.
Okay.
So that's why I didn't include it.
Thank you. And then I have another question, comment and a question, really. The board was presented with what I thought was a very fine Pupil Services report by Dr. Geigley in the spring. I also consider this to be a very fine report. Did you mesh any of the information from that report into this one, or how are these two connected?
Well, I did review that report upon coming into my position. What I wanted to focus more on the meetings that I had with the pupil service staff, because when I approached staff, the first thing I wanted to know was what's going right. What are we doing well as a pupil service staff, which didn't seem to be covered as much in the report that was done earlier. And I got a lot of great feedback from positive things that our pupil service staff members are doing. And a lot of the things that they indicated as concerns were also in that report. And then I tried to focus as many of those concerns as I could into the action plan. So I actually presented this to our pupil service staff earlier today during a collaboration session, and I got some positive feedback from all of them. So,
thank you.
Sure.
Other questions?
I just have a few comments. This is wonderful. This is very exciting to see this moving forward, and the kids will truly benefit from that, and so that's exciting to see. You have a couple of new hires that know the ASCA 3 model, which is the newest national counseling model. I've had conversations with Greg Curtis. We know we need to update the Wisconsin model. It's time and resources, and it's based on ASCA 2. The wonderful thing about ASCA 3, if you pick up a copy of it and you register it, is you get all the handouts to track data. You get all the materials that school counselors can use to do their job really effectively. Calendars, templates, action reports, and they're all in Excel spreadsheet, which it kind of can help streamline a lot of what they do. Sometimes it's just organizing all that stuff that can be difficult. As well as the new ASCA national model embeds and integrates RTI. So that makes it nice in terms of what the district's trying to do here.
Absolutely.
With PDIS, and so that's a nice dovetail. And collaboration is a theme, so it's really might be a nice resource to pick up. A couple of them have it. And I don't know if anybody's going to WISCA next week, but the Wisconsin School Counseling Association conference is next week.
Yeah, we have a few people going.
That's awesome. There's a few that usually do go.
Yeah.
I hang out with them and we laugh a lot. It's pretty. It's one of the largest conferences in Wisconsin. It used to be anyway, but I think it still is, even with budget cuts. And another tip is, even though the counselors and the pupil services team might not necessarily be in therapy in the schools, there's a free training on trauma-informed CBT that I can send you the link for.
That'd be great.
You can get 10 CEUs for it if you're licensed. Some of our students go through it if they have time. It's a recommended training, it's free, and it's on trauma-informed CBT with kids.
Okay.
If nothing else, it helps to create an environment where they can have some of those conversations to maybe intervene and at least some practical kinds of tips. I'll send you that.
Okay, thank you.
And so just thanks again. This is just fabulous, and mostly just for all the kids out there that this is just going to be beneficial for them.
Thank you.
I would just like to add that this afternoon, as Matt was presenting, I had a chance to observe part of the audience that he was sharing this effort with, and what an obvious positive engagement that Matt has with the entire staff, and very, very positive, very engaged, almost an overcrowded room that you were in. The door was held open simply because there wasn't enough room to get everybody in.
Pretty warm in there.
Pretty warm in there, but just a very attentive audience, and very, I see and hear nothing but positives coming out of your leadership. So, thank you.
Thanks.
Further comments? No? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next, we have the review of the start and end times. David Gunlock, Andy Jones.
As they make their way to the table, I would just indicate, and I would like to really thank profoundly Beth Wyman, who facilitated after we presented the facts. She worked extremely well from her training, from the original work that was done on the effort for our Oshkosh for Education efforts, and facilitating, working with our community parents, engaging them in conversation. She outlined and developed, based on meeting with us, a set of key questions that needed to be asked as a part of that. And we completed yesterday afternoon the fourth in the series of our discussions with community, and Dr. Gunlock and Dr. Jones are here to report on the results of those 4 meetings, and for you to contemplate any potential follow-up action relating to that, as we committed to engage the community in a conversation about what was happening with schools, and schools starting any time, and frankly learn more about transportation issues than really school starting time issues. With that, Dr. Gunlock.
You previewed it for me. That's good. We have a couple of objectives here this evening. Number one is to go through the presentation that we gave you before, but with the new slides, because there's some information in it that we were putting into the presentations as we went, in no small part based upon some of the recommendations from the community members who we were presenting to. They'd like to know different pieces of information, and we were able to pull that through. And then what we did is we summarized everything that we've learned over the past 4 community sessions for you. The meeting outline was pretty simple. Stan did the welcome and introductions. It was my objective to frame the problem so that they knew what we knew. And then Beth Wyman did a fantastic job of moderating the discussion. The history, this is the same slide as you had seen regarding, obviously, the revenue limits and the budget reduction. That's not new. The projected $250,000 savings, which became $180,000 when we actually implemented it, that's similar. We focused a lot on the fact that school start and end times impact families in a variety of areas, and that the start and impact times affect multiple areas of our district operations. And this is where we were able to come up with some additional information. Obviously, the budget stayed the same at about $180,000. Go to the past city bus schedules. We did confirm that we had 34% of students participating in athletics at North and 38% at West, and ultimately the participation rates were not impacted. Here's some of the information that we confirmed as well. You can see there on the graph that from 2012-13, the old schedule, to 2013-14, the 6th hour was 1.8% of classes missed. for 12-13, and then it went to 2.3% of classes missed for 13-14. You can see second hour, it went up as well. First hour for tardies and unexcused had a slight uptick as well, which we weren't quite sure why that would happen. We would assume that would go the opposite direction. When you look at North High School, you can see a similar amount of classes missed, a slight increase of about approximately 1%. And then you saw the tardies actually go down in first hour, unexcused stayed flat. So our summary of that is the attendance had a negligible impact. There really wasn't anything significant there around attendance, at least from numbers. Now, what we did do is, originally the data you were given was full GPA of all the kids in the school. We felt that was really not what we were looking for. We were looking for specifically the athletes who would be missing the classes. We were really wondering, did that impact their GPA? And what we found was, this is West data. This is the average GPAs of all the athletes. You can see that first semester, it went from 3.23 to 3.22, which was a 0.31% drop, and then second semester had a 0.32% increase. So once again, no negative impact on GPA data.
And 1/4 of those students were different students from year to year.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. So, and if you looked at the North High data there, you can see that actually we had a 1.19% drop in first semester, but a 7.5% gain in second semester. So
They do better when they don't go to class.
I don't know if I can make that conclusion, but we certainly aren't seeing an adverse effect on grade point averages or academic performance, nor attendance. We did discuss 0 hour as an option. That seemed to be something that the community members who learned about it were very interested in. Any way that we could somehow mitigate the negatives was always of interest. We did talk a little bit about the research. We did provide some of the studies, but then just, as always, people always question, well, was there really research out there? So we added these next few slides, a bibliography showing that we had 3 screens full of studies that supported that research, that later start times for secondary students is actually of benefit. We were also very careful to talk to the community members who we met with, and we were very clear about the fact we didn't do this to improve attendance. We didn't do this to improve academics. We did this to balance a budget. The fact that research showed that probably would not harm our secondary students was just an advantage that we were happy to see. We also pulled the Fox Valley school data for a variety of schools in our conference. You can see the elementary start and end times there. You can also see the high school start and end times. This was actually surprising to me a little bit that we are not that far off. If you look, you can see Appleton does have a school that ends at 3:30. Neenah and Fond du Lac end at 3:20. Obviously, Kimberly, Hortonville, Kaukauna, it's a little bit longer, about 20 minutes there. But I had assumed we were a little bit farther off, and it turned out we are not. What is interesting is our elementary day is quite short. And apparently the history on that is, in the past, years and years ago, students, since we had neighborhood schools, would go home for lunch. So there was an hour-long window. And what must have happened is when that hour-long window for lunch shrunk down to 30 minutes, it collapsed inward, which is why our elementary day is shorter, where some other schools probably shrunk up the lunch but left the start and end times the same. So that's our assumption at this point in time.
Aren't the instructional minutes already predetermined by the DPI, or?
A minimum number is, and we exceed that minimum number. It's just the other districts exceeded by farther than we do.
Because even the high school, we start almost an hour later, and we're still getting out at the same time. So other schools have almost another hour.
Yes. So if you're looking at their number of instructional minutes of instruction, they would be much higher than we would be. That's assuming they don't have a larger lunch window. They could have something during the day that is non-instructional, and that would come off of their numbers. I really don't know theirs, but yeah, you're assuming correctly.
The other issue that, the variable that we did not compare is actually the number of instructional days they have, because very quickly that's another determiner of making the maximum or minimum state hours. So we didn't compare length of school year.
So that was say about 70% of what you saw previously when we talked about this, with just a few changes to some of the data. We updated some of that.
Okay, so that was the community presentation that was given on these dates. On January 27th at 6 p.m., we were at Carl Traeger. On February 2nd, we were at Lakeside. On the 4th of February, we were at Tipler Middle School. And per the board's suggestion, Dr. Herzog's suggestion, we moved one of them to the daytime on February yesterday at 1 p.m. at North High School. Beth Wyman graciously served as our moderator between the community. We gave this presentation, and then it was followed by 8 questions to engage the people that attended these forums. During the process, notes were taken. They were scribed.
And Dr. Jones was our scribe. We didn't engage another party, so.
The left-handed scribe did as best as he could, but we took down every comment, an idea that was given. Points were reiterated for clarification. If we didn't know exactly, we asked them to clarify for us. And all the notes were typed up by Sherry Wirtz, our secretary here at Central Office. These were the 8 questions that Beth used to engage the community. First, who is here, what school, and what grade? 2, if you have no students, why are you here this evening? 3, challenges we face regarding current busing schedules. 4, current strengths of the busing schedule. 5, desired busing schedule and the outcomes. 6, what is preventing us from having the ultimate busing schedule? 7, reverting to the former schedule or busing schedule, what alternatives and educational opportunities would you suggest that we take, because we would be losing $180,000? And number 8, if we were going to keep the schedule, what ideas could you have to resolve concerns or enhance what we have already? And those were the 8 questions Mrs. Wyman used to engage the people. When we distilled the comments down and all the data we collected, we came down to 2 themes. The first theme was concerns and support for current school start and end times. And the second was the concerns and support for bus service provided. Okay? So in theme 1, these were some of the core ideas that came to light. First, having elementary students get picked up too early and in the dark. Because of, again, elementary now being picked up first. Another concern we heard was older siblings cannot help with supervision of younger students after school, because the elementary students are done earlier. Now the big brother or big sister can't watch them, was something that came through.
And we did hear one opposite of that for the before-school piece, but that was, I think, at the first or second session.
Elementary students are dropped off too early before school starts. I think there was more of a supervision comment because it's dark out in the playground, may not be available. Hard for parents to deal with students at multiple levels. We heard this a theme quite a few times. It's parents that have students at multiple levels. The times, the way we have it, makes it very challenging for them to drop off an elementary kid, and some of them in middle school, and even some all 3 levels. It was very challenging. Staff who coach miss time as well as students because of missed times that we have. The district should try adjustments like a 0 hour, and we've gone over that already, that suggestion. We need to communicate any changes better to our community regarding this issue, and I would just sum that really had a lot to do with the start of the year with the busing and some of the challenges we had, and we'll cover that in a minute. But it also, I think, served as a good marker, just again, that we can, as a district, communicate better overall. And I think, Dr. Lemger, you were early in the meeting discussing some of those thoughts as well. We'd like to revert back to the old schedule. That was a theme that came as well. And last, we would like to keep the current schedule too. We heard both people, both sides of the people said usually the group that was there was usually wanting to revert back, but there were other people that would say, hey, I actually like this, my high school student likes this schedule.
Or don't change it.
Or don't change it.
That was another big piece, the idea of when you change it, you disrupt. So even though I would like to go back, it would be a very disruptive change, and I believe one person had said that may be too early. We haven't lived with it long enough, that the change would really confuse people. That was a concern.
I think one comment was, we've just gotten used to this schedule. Don't mess with it, was one of the comments I recall. The second thing really boiled down to, really wasn't start and end times, it was really comments regarding our bus company. And they did not get busing information at the start of the school year in a timely fashion. We heard that over and over again. And that was, again, because probably the busing computer crash, et cetera, that we're all familiar with. Issues with the bus company have continued for years. One woman said this has been going on for 11 years. This isn't just this year, it's been going on for years. And we heard that theme a lot. The bus service is not getting better, and they were frustrated with them. Late buses continue to happen. The bus company is now the issue, not the start and end times. That theme came through. When we heard both sides of the coin, which was nice to hear too, we heard about concerns with drivers being late or not on time or missed pickups, those types of things. But then we also heard, generally to the south by the Lakeside District, we heard what a wonderful bus driver we have and how grateful we are for some of our drivers. So that was nice to see we got some balance on that, especially again in the Lakeside community. We heard those comments in that region. Unfortunately, we had, statistically, we had 45 members turn out for the 4 forums. As of yesterday, as we looked in our Infinite Campus program, we have 14,127 parents and guardians, which would mean the turnout for our forums was 0.32%, less than 1%. So that is the data. I do need to remind the board that, here's the decision, but if we're going to make any decisions, any changes, they would have to be relatively soon, because to make any changes, there are just so many spokes to this wheel that are impacted. So that's just a heads up.
In our goal, if we had direction from the board to prepare one way or the other, or you could choose not to take any action on the second meeting of this month, or you could direct us to prepare a appropriate action resolution for you to consider either voting up or down. But since the position is in place, the operation is in place, no action would mean continuation, or if there is divided opinion on what should be done, we clearly have designed this to be completed with a report to you now and 2 weeks from now for you to take a vote on directing us to change the schedule. So that opportunity presents itself, but it is not necessary for you to have any action on your second meeting of the month. If you do that, we should just be given guidance through the board president as to your desire, and we will prepare accordingly for the board to consider. One of the things that we are most appreciative, I learned a lot. I had some long conversations after meetings with parents. It was a very informative evening virtually at every one of the sessions. I had a chance to spend time with individuals who I had not had cross meetings with before that were very pleasant, very decent, and sometimes went for an hour, hour and a half after the meeting. And so if there was a real plus from this, is it created another opportunity for me to have community engagement that I was really pleased with. And if you have somebody who comes to a meeting and they want to talk, I never say no. And the blessing was that in each time, either in the evening or yesterday afternoon, I was not in a position to have to rush to the next item, next event, and I feel blessed by participating in this, by having community conversations that wouldn't have occurred had we not done this. So.
The other thing that was really glaring to me is we had 4 meetings, we had 45 people there. Typically what you sometimes expect is for somebody to say, just do this that doesn't impact me and then restore my service, whatever that service is. We did not get one person who threw something else into the bucket and said, do that instead. So I think that shows a real level of maturity as far as our community. They get our dilemmas. I mean, I really do think people are now understanding the fiscal condition of schools in general, and our school district in particular, and that there is no easy fix to any of these issues. So that was kind of nice to see, because you don't always see that.
Lastly, I'd like, I think all of us from the district, I would like to publicly thank Beth Wyman for giving up her evenings. She continues to be a community leader that's willing to get involved and serve as our moderator, and gave up her evenings and time. So we want to publicly thank Beth for being just a great partner with us in the school district.
She did a great job.
Agreed. I actually would like to hear from our two student representatives on this. I realize you can't speak for the grade schools, but from the high school level, what have you heard?
Right.
Or what do you think of it yourselves?
Right. Besides the few comments sort of when this change occurred, students have adapted. And anyone I've talked to likes it. I mean, they already use the time before school to catch up with stuff or to go see a club advisor and get stuff done. So it's like there's already a 0 hour in place. And with that being said, and I know it's kind of far away and we don't know whether a 0 hour will be implemented, don't make it mandatory. Right? Because
We would not do that.
or with some sort of I feel like it should be up to the student to decide whether or not they need to, because in some cases, athletes don't need to be in class to learn the stuff. And while they would be in class 3 days a week, they're getting by and they're okay. And they need to do other things with that morning time. And so I think that keeping it the same, at the very worst, athletes get extra time to do their work. And other students have no problem with it because they get to sleep a little bit longer, or do club stuff, and so they're pretty happy from what I see.
Catherine, I'm sure, David, before you have a comment, just for our audience out on television, etc., the 0 hour, you're absolutely correct. We cannot mandate that. We can't say, here's the schedule, and Catherine, you will be at a 0 hour class. That has to be totally voluntary. Because the main reason is we can't mandate it because we can't provide transportation. So it would be totally voluntary whether a student would elect to take a 0 hour. And if they did, they'd be done 6th hour. That's the upside of it. But you're absolutely correct, but we cannot mandate, so everybody's clear out there.
Don't worry about that.
We can't make it. David, I'm sorry, please.
So yeah, I mean, you definitely do see pros and cons, and I would almost see there's more pros leaning towards the new schedule. I would agree with the whole change to incorporate change sequences in that, in a sense that maybe if something was so dire to be changed, that would happen over X amount of time. However, from a student's perspective, before school, you now have, I guess, more access to events in a sense that like students aren't really crabby, because like you got jazz bands before, you got sports going on, and I feel like it's easier to go to, as well as the majority of just more sleep. That's understandable. And a third option for a pro for this is that high schoolers adapt. They do. If an hour or so or 30 minutes really doesn't make too much of a difference, most just don't have a problem with, here's your time, just be by there. But I do see the pros. Now, with the flip side of that, again, you are staying till 3:30. But again, it's nothing to. I haven't heard anything around, especially the high schools, like, oh, we get out at 3:30, we get out too late. So I haven't really heard of any like concerning dire issues, and I've just heard more of positive things out of. We can get there early for these events. We can sleep in more. So that's nice to hear. But I really haven't heard anything that's against this new schedule.
And again, just as a kind of a wrap-up, again, coming back, these are all great points, David, that you made on the benefits and things that are positive about it. But again, this decision was not made because of trying to do great things academically or on the behalf of students. This really was strictly a budgetary, if we don't, do this cut, we're going to have to find $180,000 to take out of someplace else. And I get it's a win. I'm hearing from you, that's great. But again, just that was the fundamental issue at hand, 2 years ago when we made this decision, or a year and a half, I should say.
And I'd almost like to point out, too, that the budgetary options, that going back to that ADAPT thing, that ADAPT option that I gave you is that since high schoolers can be adapted to like something as so small as timing, I think that it is smart to go with the more financial beneficial option because it doesn't make too much of a difference. That's why I'm saying it's good.
And the data would support that. Dr. Herzog.
I've only had one parent who has spoken to me about this. She's spoken to me multiple times, and I appreciate her input because every time she shared with me, she had something new to say. She has a high schooler and a middle schooler. One of her comments was, the data support this. The research has been out there for years on the later start times for high schoolers. She reported that with her kids, one of the things she noticed was they were less tired than they were under the old schedule. I do empathize with elementary parents whose children are outside in the dark much earlier, and I suspect that the group that is most impacted by that are the children who used to start their elementary school day at around 10 to 9 o'clock, and now they're starting earlier because of a uniform elementary start time. I don't have a solution for that, but I think the data in terms of the high schoolers starting later and what you've shared in terms of negligible, if any, negative impact on attendance and grades would seem to suggest that we should stay with this schedule.
May I just comment briefly on the issue that indicated that we heard from parents both who were affected by the latest start, that being Oakwood and Lakeside, that they said that for working parents that old schedule was a killer, and that they were very positive about the fact that school started earlier, and we heard that both when we did the Traeger, where we had a number of Oakwood parents, and we certainly heard it also at Lakeside, was the issue that very late start for those two schools, which were the greatest exception, was they were grateful that it no longer was at 8:45.
Thank you. The other thing that struck me in your presentation was some of the criticism directed to the bus company or the drivers, and I don't think that's necessarily fair in that the drivers have certain guidelines, and they're supposed to wait for children to come out of their houses, and they don't always do that. Maybe mom or dad decided to drive them to school, and the bus company didn't know that. So the bus is waiting the normal amount of time for the child to come out, and conversely, at the end of the day, they're not supposed to drop the elementary children off, I believe, if there's no one there to receive them. So those are things that put the schedule off, and it's nothing the bus drivers or companies have any control over. So I think we have to be a little bit careful about criticizing the bus company or the drivers for lateness, and I'm not sure, again, how we address that other than maybe education with the parents to make sure that if they're not going to have their child on the bus, that is communicated so that it doesn't have a domino effect on later pickups.
Well, to a certain extent, that I think that's the least of the issue. The issue is the interpersonal communication skills, which we should hold bus drivers accountable for.
Absolutely.
And I think the things that are controlled by those variables are certainly understood, but the reports are communication skills, and that's really an issue. And we are empathetic with the bus company because, again, it gets worse. As I've said a number of times, the quality of bus drivers goes down with the improvement of the economy. And having a 2.5-hour job in the morning and 2.5-hour job in the afternoon with no benefits in between, you compete for a different population, and as yesterday, economists basically said the state of Wisconsin now is in what is a virtual full employment because the margin now at the ranges of employment that exist in the state is basically as full employment rationally you can get with skills there and many jobs left waiting. And the issue is how can we develop some better people skills with bus drivers. That's really the issue. And that we have to continue to work on from a standpoint that Linda Crone has done direct communication. We're providing PBIS training to bus drivers. We've provided training on basically on how to verbal judo, how to diminish issues on the bus with students, how to better communicate and relate. But the sophistication and the communication skills of bus drivers are the ones that we hear the most of, and we'll continue to work on that. But and then on the other side, there are a set of bus drivers that have been employed for a long time by Cobussen who are doing an excellent job and are reflected on extremely positive. They know the families, they know the relationship, and if we only had the magic of having only cloning those wonderful generally retirees who are there and have always been there, and not have that turnover of bus drivers who do that only for a short period of time. They don't become as dedicated to the profession, and they also don't have the empathy and understanding of dealing with children and their parents. And because children report to parents what bus drivers say, but when bus drivers say it directly to parents and it's inappropriate, we certainly hear about it.
I also want to thank administration for providing 2 different times a day for parents.
It was a great suggestion, thank you. And lastly, we'd like to thank the community for coming out and giving the input. Those people, it was very valuable input, so thank you.
We met some delightful people through this process.
Other comments? Questions? Mr. Delo.
First off, if 0.32% of our parental or guardian population is the respondents of these surveys, it kind of strikes me, especially since we did have some broadcasting of these events, that perhaps the community at whole does not see this as being some huge problematic situation. I have myself received 3 emails in support of the current schedule. As a parent of an elementary kids and middle school kids, it does stink. I mean, you have to pick up your kids at the elementary level and find something to do for an hour before you go pick up your middle school. But then at the same time, you adapt to this situation. And with anything, as parents, I think that the most important thing that you give a child is consistency in their environment. I would suggest that with the data that's been provided, to spend $180,000 on reverting back to that system would be ill-advised. The data you've provided here about the academics are negligible as far as a negative effect on this. However, I would suggest that we take a look at, as you said, over and over and over, you heard comments about the service from the bus company, about not getting information in a timely fashion at the beginning of the year. I would like to know in May why or what the bus company is planning on doing in August so that this does not happen again. This cannot happen again with that, what they have.
I think Mr. Mack has a meeting, you want to allude to that?
Right. Sue and Shara and I are planning meetings both with local management, but I've also alerted through connections with other bus operators and connections at the state joint convention. I've already had a call from the corporate leadership and ownership with Cobussen, and we'll be scheduling those meetings to go through all of those pieces, and we're accumulating issues and incidents to share with them at that time, and we would just invite that either sending email or preferably email rather than voicemail, because it's good to have it in writing. If there are individuals who have had experiences, that we would collect those and we would have those available to us as we gather. We have a litany of issues that relate to special education, but also regular transportation, and we'll be working with that with the expectation. In addition, Dr. Gunlock has worked with them on helping with them identifying the scheduling or bus routing software that would be replaced, that we're supporting to match with their other locations, and there is no reason with the data that's available that they cannot be by June running dry runs on those schedules, knowing that they need to be modified as families move in locations, but we will be really certainly having the pressure on them to perform in a manner that avoids what you described. So we do have as a separate issue, not anything to do with the starting and ending times, but this has been a healthy thing for us to go through, to listen and hear from a greater portion, although it was a small number in the community. We were shocked after the first night that we did the program at Traeger. We were simply shocked walking away that the emphasis, 70% of the comments had nothing to do with the schedule. It had to do with transportation services. And so it was a good learning experience for us.
Other comments?
I just have a comment, because I was the one that put this on the agenda last April after an entourage of people from out there came my way. And I thought, well, maybe it warrants some investigation, some looking at, some discussion. And I think that's what I value most, even though I know it took a lot of work, is I think it lends credibility that when there's concerns that come up in the community, that we take it seriously and we're willing to put it out on the table and at least look at it. And I think that helps the community feel like they can trust the board, they can trust central office to take their issues seriously and give them time to reflect. I had conversations with some delightful young people at your school in the leadership class last year, and I asked, what do you think about the start time? And they all looked around at each other and they said, we're up anyway. It really doesn't matter. We're awake. We're doing something. We're up. So I remember hearing that and thinking, well, maybe it's not that big a deal to the young people as much as it is to the adults. So I just value the fact that we took it seriously and we explored it. And it sounds like you learned some additional information too. And
very valuable.
It was a healthy lesson for all of us, and we really appreciated doing it. We actually look forward to going to each of those. And our guessing game was how many visitors we had. But we appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Lastly, 2015-16 district calendar.
Good evening. As Matt said, we're here to introduce the 2015-2016 calendar, the proposed calendar, and you should have one in your packet. And I'm just going to go through some of the highlights of this calendar that primarily are consistent with past calendars. We have 190 professional staff days, contract days, and there's been 190 contract days, teacher contract days in the previous calendars, and that's a consistent. We have 179 student contact days, and we've also had 179 in the past. As you're probably well aware, that the rule of 180 went away with the 14-15 school year, so there is no requirement to have 180 student contact days any longer, but the hours are we have to have a minimum set number of hours. With that 179, you may be thinking, well, if it was 180, why did we have 179? Well, we had 179, and we have that 1/2 day of parent-teacher conferences, and you can count that as a student contact day. So in the past, it was 179 student contact face-to-face, and that half of parent-teacher conference day was number 180. So as in this one report, we just said it's 179 face-to-face. It exceeds the hours of instruction required by DPI. And just for your information, we will have 45 extra hours at the elementary level, 111 extra hours at the middle school level, and 4 extra hours at the high school level. The high school level will be a little snug.
But we do, as it says in here, we have 4 inclement weather makeup days. We make up every school day. So the only time it would possibly become an issue is if we had a late start or early release or something like that. And those have become, in my tenure in education, those have become less and less and less over the past recent years. So we have consistency with the parent-teacher conferences that are outside the school day, where we have 12 hours at every level. We have consistency with 1.5 hours with an open house and freshman orientation. We have 9 early release dates, and this is consistent with the past, the 9 early release dates. However, we are proposing to increase the professional learning time between 30 and 60 minutes. And we haven't quite determined that exactly yet, because we still have to look at, make sure the busing will work, make sure that at the secondary we have class periods that are meaningful, not too short that they don't have any meaning to them. At the elementary school, we also have to look at the lunch times, so that the lunch times don't end up to be too early, because, that just doesn't make sense also. So we're going to work on some of those pieces yet. There's a traditional 1 week of spring break, Good Friday, then a spring break. We can't start till after September 1st. So if you've ever worked on a calendar, if you can't start till after September 1st, you have 190 work days. There isn't a lot of flexibility in between, especially if you have the week-long spring break. It doesn't give you a lot of movement. One thing here that's probably seems to me might be the biggest change here is we're proposing that we have graduation, high school graduation, on Saturday, June 4th. With West High School at the Cove Center at 10 a.m. because there is no air conditioning. You want to get that going early in the morning. North Hot.
Since when is June cold or hot? Since when is June hot?
Yeah, well, it probably usually isn't, but.
I've been 3
years ago, it was really hot, right? Actually, I also recall being swelteringly hot on graduation day in my suit, sitting up on the stage several years in a row.
I hope it comes back soon.
Well, we're just going to take the precaution and go at 10 o'clock, yeah.
It's Florida hot, but it's Wisconsin.
Well, there's a difference.
And we're going to have North High at 1 o'clock. Now, here's a couple reasons that we're going to propose that, is that the weekend ceremonies are much easier for families and relatives to travel and participate and attend. And the other piece is that sometimes haste makes waste, where they're calculating GPAs, they're calculating class rank, they're looking to determine who is credit deficient relative to walking across the stage and those pieces. So it gives them more time for accuracy and to make sure they have that nailed down.
But then they have to go back to school Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday?
No.
Got it.
And just for your information, we did contact DPI, and that is not an issue relative to hours for seniors.
Okay.
They just said, we don't worry about it. You're done, you're done. Yep. And lastly with this, we'd like to thank the committee of 7 administrators, 7 teachers, and 1 paraprofessional who put in 10 extra hours outside of the workday constructing the calendar. We had great dialogue, great sometimes some wonderful debate, but people worked hard, they gathered a lot of input, and shared their expertise, and this is the calendar that we're proposing going forward for 15-16. Any thoughts, any questions?
Questions and comments? No? All right. Thank you very much.
We'll bring it back to you in 2 weeks then for approval.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Do I have any requests for future agenda items? No, seeing none. Announcements? Could I get a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Please call the roll.
Tito?
Aye.
Tito, aye. Eliason?
Aye.
Eliason, aye. Garner? Aye. Garner, aye. Herzog? Aye. Herzog, aye. Lumberger?
Aye.
Lumberger, aye. Saginac?
Aye.
Saginac, aye. Wiedenhoff?
Aye.
Wiedenhoff, aye. Motion carried.
We are adjourned.